Hey everybody, and welcome back. I've got another tutorial for you, and in this one I'm going to be going over some ways you can improve your workflow by having an actual concept and then making a little sketch before you do anything. And that way you can get in, and like I've got on the screen here, I've just got some ideas. Now you don't know what I'm going to do yet, but it's going to be a city in space because that's kind of the things I love doing, is like sci-fi. So well, the concept here is that I've got this super toy torus, and what's going to happen in this tutorial is I'm going to take the area in the center, and it's going to be a terrain with a water plane, and then I'm going to have possibly some open areas here with like a shield or something, and then some ground at the bottom, and it's going to look pretty cool. And one of the ways we're going to achieve this is going to be through PureRef, which you can see up here. If you just kind of like right click this, you can move it around, and if you have never used PureRef, you're missing out, because what it'll allow you to do is kind of build concept art into one block, so you can have different reference pictures and things and ideas, because it's going to be 2 or 3 different pictures that I'm going to draw from to make what I'm going to do. And it's free, but I did make a little donation, so like $3. These people are given some really good software, so I just give them a couple bucks. You know, don't just download it free. Give them at least $1 or something. We'll get that check. So you just click download on that, and then once you've got that downloaded, it'll ask you where you want to install that. And then once you're set up, I would pick up like a Google search and find the different art and things you want to get into. So you can take the pictures right off the website and drop them directly into PureRef, and then just kind of tile them out. So with no further delays, let's jump right in. I'm using 3.4 alpha just because I like it, and I do recommend you get the new 3.3 LTS long-term support. It's pretty cool. So I'm just going to delete this cube, and the concept, like we're going for concept art here, right? So what I'll do is just pull up my PureRef. So I've got my PureRef board here, and you can just right click to kind of drag this, and inside it works like the 3D viewport, so it's pretty sweet in that way. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my concept art, and you can just drag and drop. You can drag and drop from the web as well, and you just zoom out with the middle mouse like I said, and you can like left click to drag these around, and then they'll be in the board, and you just drag them in there any way you want. No right or wrong way, it's just however you want. You can overlap a couple, whatever you want to do. Okay, so there's a couple things you're going to need to complete this tutorial. One is definitely going to be the Blender kit, which is absolutely free, and you get your models, materials, scenes, HDRs, and brushes. And then the second one is a way to scatter objects. I'm using IA Scatter. I highly recommend them. And out of all of the add-ons that I've bought, the IA Scatter has pretty much been the most useful, and we're going to use this to create some cities and scatter some objects in our scene. So if you don't have a way to do that, it is definitely time to upgrade your game and get that worked out. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go over the concept art. So from PureRef, I was looking at some of these, and I'm like, this is kind of neat. I like the glass here, but don't like the scene. I like the idea here, but I don't necessarily like the landscape. I like the dome here, which is really cool. And then for the overall concept, I really like the inside of this because it's just a torus. That's all that really is. And then IA Scatter, I was thinking, man, it's designed to make stuff like this. So what I want to do is start off with the torus and get in here and make this at least get the layout worked out, so I can have the water, and then the terrain is going to be like a hard metallic thing. It doesn't have to be rocks or anything. And then I'm just going to scatter some cities and use some weight paint for distribution to keep them where I want them. Attach an HDR to make it look good. And as you can see, they didn't put any detail into this stuff in the background. They got some ships or whatever they are back in there. We don't know. Maybe it's a ship. And then work on some front-facing details and make them look really nice, because that would be what you would focus on. You go, ooh, this is neat, but wow, look at that, right? So you want to have a lead in. So let's jump right in. Keep that cursor there. I'm just going to Shift A and drop in a regular Taurus. And I did try this with the Super Taurus Supertoid, but I really didn't like the results. So just R and X, and rotate that 90 on the number pad and hit enter. Now I'm going to scale this up a good little bit. That way my zoom, I can kind of go a little bit further than usual. And if you have trouble zooming in, try turning the model or hit Control and hold it, and then hold middle mouse, and you can do quite a good zoom there. And so we're going to want to be inside of the Taurus for this, so I'm going to hit 1 on the number pad. And if you don't have that, you can go into the Edit, Preferences, Input, click Emulate number pad, and then you can hit 1 for the different views, 7, 3, or Control 1 or Control 7, and give you these different views. But I'm going to kind of stick with view number 3, and then hit G and Z. Maybe bring this up just above the grid. And now I'll zoom in, kind of break out of that a little bit. And I want to zoom in inside, because this is going to be the main focal point. And you can see this almost looks identical to what we were dealing with. Now, I wouldn't subdivide this, so you keep the stress of the scene nice and low, and we really need these channels anyways, so we can put our terrain and our water and the different things in here. Now, usually I would work on the lighting really soon, but this is not interior design exactly, so I'm gonna kind of skip that for now, because I want to get my scene kind of worked out. So what I want to do is go in under face select and edit mode inside the Taurus. And before we get too far, let's make sure to drop a camera in here. And so I've already got the camera, so I'll select it and I'll hit Control Alt 0. And what that's going to do is it's going to lock a camera to this view. So later on, and I can kind of change this by hitting G or R and Z to kind of rotate it, and then R and Y maybe to look up, and then G and Z to kind of bring it down, and then G and X. I know this is tedious, right? And then to kind of get that swoop up kind of look. And then we can come out to the camera as well and click on that, and then drop that down, and probably put something like for the size at 44 millimeters to pull it out just a little bit, and that won't change anything instead of changing the focal length. And if you're getting any clipping issues, grab the clip start and roll that back, because sometimes the camera is going to clip, or maybe you just hit that setting by accident. Want to throw that in there. Now, just for this moment, I can click the eyeball up here and hide my camera, and then middle mouse and break out of that. Now I'll jump into edit mode. Alright, so that all looks pretty good for right now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the mouse cursor inside, and what I will do is I'm going to apply an IA scatter to the main Taurus body. So all you really got to do is click IA scatter one time, and what it's going to do is it's going to kind of like block everything up real crazy, and that is actually going to help us out in making a city. But what I want to do is use an instance for this. So I'm gonna have to bring the mouse cursor outside, and I'm just gonna drop in basic cube. And what we can do is we can play around with this thing, and I'll hit / to just isolate it so the scene has no lag, it doesn't slow down for you, so you can move a lot faster this way. Now there's a few ways you can do this. What you can do is you can just go into edit mode with this thing, and you could subdivide it a couple times, maybe hit Shift R and subdivide it just a bit more. And then you could even like manually model this thing to get some kind of depth to it, and just extrude a few different spots. And what I will do is just select a few of these and make some just random extrusions on it. And in the distance, that would actually end up looking like a building, so that's pretty cool. And I'm going to need another one, so I'll just hit that button and oh, that's so annoying. If that's happening to anybody else, I don't think that's ever been corrected. You have to put the mouse up here and then Shift A and drop in your cube. For this one, I'm actually going to use Mesh Poly, which is a pretty powerful add-on. And what I'll do is I'll jump into edit mode with this and subdivide it. Shift R a couple times, and then this only works in object mode, so I'll kind of play with these settings a little bit to kind of get a very small extrusion on it. And I'm looking for a lot of like weird random stuff here. And wow, that is really close, but not quite what I was looking for. So I'm going to bring the max up just a touch more, and that's pretty cool because I'm looking for like this sci-fi look, right? And so now I'm going to add a sphere. I'll put a UV sphere in, and just so it looks good, I'm actually going to change that to 64. And for some reason that did not take. There we go. So now with the sphere selected, I can just jump into edit mode with this and make sure I'm on face select. And what I'll do is I'm going to go up to selection. I'm going to do probably like a checker deselect, and then I'll hit the spacebar search, and I want to extrude along normals, and I'm going to select that and then just gently kind of bring out a small extrusion. So that looks kind of neat, right? So these would be my 3 instances for the IA Scatter, and I want these all to be in the same thing. They need to be in a collection. So I'll just call this Scatter City 1 in case I want to do more. So I've got the cube and all this selected. I can just highlight it here. I could have just pressed M and done new collection, but I'm just going to drag it down. And now all of that is safely in a collection. I can hit the / and come back out. And I'm going to want to run all these down and apply the scale to them. So I'm going to run this down a good bit. So something like that, and Control A, and I'll apply that scale. And then I'm actually going to scale this one a little bit in, make it look a little weird like my more or less taller building. And then I'll scale it down and apply that scale, and then I'll do the same here. Probably something like that. And all this can be adjusted later on. So now, inside of the IA Scatter, I can go back, and what I'll actually need to do is go over to Geometry Node, since I didn't set that up with the Modify UI, which gives you a nice split screen. And what I've got to do is join this, because that's just not going to work. Make a new workspace. Call this one Geometry Nodes Editor. And now I've got this big node. Man, this thing is great. If you haven't used it before, it's got a wind modification on it. You can do a ton of stuff. So you can just, in one node, animate your grass, do weight painting, instancing, all kinds of stuff. So now I want to call this under the collection of Scatter City, and then use collection. So now I've got this city, which obviously I need to scale a little bit more. And the rotation and everything's off, so all this has to be reset. And I need to do the weight paint for this. And I'm probably not even going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to get in and press 0 under my camera angle. And now that I'm in here, I'm going to click, let me zoom in. I'm going to click use weight for distribution, and everything disappears. So now I can take this and do Control Tab and go to weight paint. And if you know anything about weight paint, F gives you a bigger brush. You just left click to make it the size you want. Control F will change the weight. So that way, if I wanted to go down to something small like this and just have a little bit of city scatter there, it won't be much. And you see the weight will follow. So if I hit Control F and bring it all the way up, the weight jumps to full, which is 1. And you can see my city's starting to kind of like pop up. And the rotation, everything's off. We'll fix all that. And I'll give you a real quick lesson in weight paint. If you look right here under the gradient, just click that and then left click and hold, and you can kind of bring this over and it'll create a gradient effect. If you want to scatter, that way you can, but that's not why I'm teaching you this. So blue represents 0, 5 represents 5. Excuse me, red represents 5, so blue is 0. It's a 0 to 5 scale. And as I go forward, you would see this is 0, the light blue is 1, green is 2, yellow is 3, orange is 4, and then red is 5. And obviously, the darker it is towards the 5 spectrum, you're gonna get more distribution. And then, of course, like any good node, it will have a density maximum. You can bring up the density and start adding some more buildings to our mesh, but I'm going to get rid of all of that. And then I'm not going to do this in the video, but I'm just going to paint the areas where I want it, and then I'll show you how to adjust it. If you decide to get IA Scatter, you're going to need to know. And just a quick tip while I'm doing this, I ran into this as an issue. What you can do is, and I'll go back to object mode and then edit, is you can highlight the areas you're working on to get more mesh. So I'll just select the faces, let's see, Shift Alt, and I will click these 2 areas because this is where my cities are going to be, and hit W and then subdivide, and you will get a much better distribution if you do that. Maybe just a couple of times, you don't have to do too much. And I think that will be pretty good once you get all said and done. And that way you're not subdividing extra mesh you don't need to. Alright, one quick little thing before we get too far into this is to go ahead and just press M and mute the node. And then from here, I'll jump into wireframe. I'll just hit Z and go to wireframe, and you see when we're going to be painting the weight on here, the distribution and so on, it's going to be protruding through the other side because we only have one face we're working with. And so we're painting weight on that one face. So what we can do is come in here and put a solidify modifier on, and now you see you've got an extra layer you can paint on. So if you bring this in or out, you can kind of change how that is, but just note that even though you can see that mesh in there, you cannot paint on it until you apply it. So you want to immediately apply that, and see this will come back, and now we can start working on it. If I go back over to solid mode and press M to unmute that, and I go into weight paint, you can see that I've got this whole thing basically painted inside and out because that's how it was. So I'll have to fix that and then I'll be right back. And just so you can get these lines like where they're supposed to be, you can hit tab and go back and forth and then do small areas and just kind of paint those areas in, and that will give you a little better direction. Okay, so after doing the weight paint to get the city to appear where I want, I realized that no matter what I did with the random rotation or the other rotations, or even scaling things down so they're a little bit smaller, it just was not going to work out. So all you have to do to fix this is go into number 3 on the number pad, which puts you in the original view we started from. And from here you can tab into edit mode and then tap Z and go to wireframe. And the workaround for this is going to be using a mirror modifier. So what we can do is we can select, as long as you're on face select, just grab half of the model and it's just kind of scan around a little bit and make sure we've got the half. Yep, looks pretty good. So from here we can just hit X and then delete faces, and you'll notice that if you're following exactly, you'll see there's something here you can't click on. Now if you hit out of tab and go back to solid view, you'll see that is our water plane, and the water plane is still there. So what you can do from here, alright, so from here all I'll do is I'll take these two models and shift click together and hit Control J to join them. And actually my geometry nodes disappeared, so what I didn't do was select the water and then select the torus, because if the torus is the main object with the modifier, it'll erase. So now if I hit Control J, I get all that back. So I'll just hit 3 to kind of line this up. Doesn't really have to be. Actually, you can look at it from any angle. And what I'll do is now I'll just add a mirror modifier. I'll add it on, take away the X and add it on the Z, because that was from the original rotation. And if I hit 0 and kind of bring it back this area, now I've got these two. And this is not applied yet. We don't want to apply the mirror until the city is right. So you can see there's no mesh here to look at, but if you click the on cage, you'll be able to see it if you prefer, but just don't apply it yet because we got to fix a few things here to make it work. So what I'll do is I'll select the sphere because it was given a little bit of trouble, and I'll just delete the sphere out. And now we can work with populating the city the way it is, and a little bit of the weight paint will have to be moved to make it right, but I'll just go back into the torus and select this as the main. If you just click this little button right here, set as active modifier, it will pop back up. And then the density here can be increased to probably something like 5,000. And now I want to take the rotation here and kind of fix that up. And I'll just rotate the city on the general axis, the x-axis, until it kind of meets wherever I want it. You could randomize it just a little bit, or you can turn these on the Z. Alright, so after putting these to, let's see, 180 degrees and cleaning up some of the weight paint, and there's no buildings over here, but it is still mimicking the weight since it's copying that, but it's not copying the modifier just yet. That looks pretty good, but what I want to do is add a cube into this mix just to kind of fill in some of the gaps. So I'll put a cube in here and then just S to scale it down. and I will apply said scale, then go back in, and still don't need it that big at all. So with the cube selected, I can just kind of even blindly scale it down a little bit. Now let's grab that cube and pull it out. Alright, so scale this bad boy down a good bit and apply that. Go back in and check that out. That's not too bad, but what I want to do is grab this cube and I'll forward slash and bring it. Wow, I don't like the clipping there. Let's grab the end panel and go to view and bring this clip start down just a little bit. And what I'll do is, with the top view to this, drop the 3D cursor there, and I'll put our UV sphere back into play. And just kind of scale it down a touch. Don't have to have this as high resolution or anything. And I'll just join these two. And so now whatever I've done here will appear inside. And so now if I zoom in, I've got all these little spheres on top. So it looks pretty neat, and you can continue to do stuff like that. And then grabbing this modifier again, I can go back to my density max and maybe bring it to 10,000. Oops, went to 1,000. Let's put that to 10. And populate that so it's real nice and thick, because it doesn't have to be like right up in the camera. All right. Okay, for a part of the scene creation that is super important, in other words, if you want to get this to look right, not only with the textures, but which way the buildings are actually facing. So if you're fighting the rotation, then what you'll need to do is grab the torus main, which is going to highlight obviously all of the buildings, hit tab and jump into edit mode, then just tap A to select everything. And it works good if you're on face select, because that's what we're going to be working with to be the normals. So all you have to do to orientate this correctly, once you've kind of messed around in the IA scatter or even before, so it doesn't really matter, you just hit Alt N, and now what you can do is flip those normals. And as you can see, now all the buildings are pointing outside, so that doesn't really work. And what you'll have to do is hit Alt N and flip those. Now if you're over in the geometry nodes workspace and you're trying to get these buildings to kind of like line up, that actually, you know, so they actually make sense, then all you have to do is get into the geometry nodes workspace and get in the node. And what you can do is you can come down and you can align these to the normal. Once you've done that, once you flip the normals, you can align these to the normal, because now the normals are pointing in. And in order to see these normals, you just take the node and you can hit M to mute that. And now real quick in the overlay, for some reason this was defaulted to 0, don't know why, but it's hard to see that, so you can extend them out so you can see them, probably even a good ways like that. And then when you hit Alt N, you can see that the normals are now inside, right? And this is going to give you a pretty good idea of exactly which way your building's going to face. So if you have any buildings on this slab right here, they're going to overlap your other buildings. And then all of these should be good, and you could probably do a separate selection here just to have like a little distance between it. Maybe you could even take this and separate this one, or just texture this area with like a road going through the middle of the city, if you will. And that is definitely something to look into later after the tutorial, maybe doing another tutorial on that and updating everything and making everything a little more advanced and kind of fine-tuning it. But just for now, so you can understand how these look and why they look the way they do. Now if I hit M, you can see that the normals are inside And I did have this set to the rotation for the normals, and I had it at 180 degrees. But if you bring that down to 0, and then if you grab everything with these values all zeroed out, and now you hit Alt-N with everything selected and hit flip, and now they're actually facing. So I hope that wasn't confusing, but just understand that if you flip the normals, turn on the overlays, you'll see which way they're going, and you can align these to normals or not. And if you do it this way, like before the mirror modifier, then you could change these and you don't have to do it that way. But since we followed the procedure with the mirror, this just works out a lot better. So if I just click align to normals, you know you've got them all facing the right way. And then, like I said, if you can't get in here potentially and get the weight paint off of these, and let me go back to the layout so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So if I was to go in and see, like, I don't want these overlapping right here, what I could do is I could go in here. Let's see if a loop cut would actually help. Not really. See, you can actually add more geometry and thicken these up if you wanted to. That's why we subdivided these originally. But you could go under face select, and I'm leaving that loop cut in there. I may just have to pull that out. Alright, so I'm trying to grab this face set, but it's not letting me. So what I could do is just go to line, or edge select, I always call that line. So edge select, and then I'm selecting this entire loop here, and I can hit G and come back. I can do is double tap G, and I can kind of bring these in if I wanted to. Probably going to mess up the mesh a little bit, but if you really wanted to kind of squish these in, you could. Let's see if I put that on the Z axis. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That definitely works. So you could kind of bring those in, and if you could get a loop cut in here, and apparently there's something going on somewhere in the mesh. All right, now for the fun part, I'll just grab the mirror modifier and click apply, and then we've got all of this, all these cities just kind of hanging out, doing their thing now. So now what we got to do is put that body of water back in here. If you've got a few buildings out in the middle, you can just bring the weight to 0 and get out here and kind of paint them out, if you will, and get those out of the middle of the water. And if you have any you can't quite get a hold of, you can just kind of bring this in and get the more of a flat view, and those will disappear for you. And that's going to be good enough for right now. Alright, very good. So now I'll turn back around, go back into my camera view, and that's one of the big reasons I do the camera view, so when I get out of sync there I can just bring it back. So now I can go ahead and do the thing I did before, and I'll just grab a couple of lines here, a couple of face lines, and I will separate these by selection, jump back out, and hide this. And alright, so that's good. So now I can make this a water. So from here you can take the time. I'm not going to drag the tutorial out too far, but you could take the time to go in to the layout and then bring up Blender Kit and start pulling materials and get your water and things like that. Alright, so what I would like to do now is turn some of this into glass, and so I'll just grab the torus itself, and what we can do is we'll look and see. So like up here or these two, and I'm thinking like right here and here, these two areas, I can separate these as well. I'll go ahead and pull up an HDR. We'll put a sci-fi HDR maybe, if we can get that. Actually, I'll have to type in space. And then get this, drop it in, and this, these backgrounds, these HDRIs, you can go like as low as you want if you got a slow computer. It really doesn't matter. I'm just putting 4096. I'm just doing 4K because that's how I want to do it. And now that looks pretty good. So somewhere over here, I'll hit Shift A, and I'm going to drop in a sun. And my sun actually instanced for some reason, so I got to grab it and pull it out. Yep. So now I can point the sun towards my model and increase this to say like 5, and then when I go back inside the model, I'll be able to see what's going on. And this is the rendered view, so it doesn't look great yet, but I'll clean all this up and assign the materials. Alright, so there's a bunch of different ways we could do this, and I'm just going to select the outside 2 rails here, and then I have to select the inside rails as well, or at least those areas, since we do have a solidify modifier on this. It's not going to work otherwise. So I'll make sure to select all of these, and just kind of double check and see if I got the same one selected on the outside. And go into wireframe, and it doesn't look like I got the right one selected out here, so see if I can start this over. I'll select that ring, this one, and then I want this one and this one. Alright, so that's good, and what I can just do here is separate these as a selection as well. And now I can jump back over to solid, and so these double rings, which are going to be, or these quad rings if you will, are going to be the glass, and then you can just choose any material glass that ends up looking good. So I'm just going to save this, and if you don't save often, you probably should start doing that. So I'm going to save that, and then what I'll do is I'll drop a procedural glass on there. Let's try this smudged glass for now. And that way we'll hopefully be letting enough light into the scene. Okay, so that is just not going to work. So let me just grab the glass and hit H to hide it. And you can see, yeah, a lot of sunlight comes in. It's a little too dark though. I really don't like that. So what I'm going to do is take the sun, and I will delete the sun. Alt H unhide. Go to HDRs, just hit enter, and let's search for something. So right in the beginning there's a stratosphere, and I want to try that one. Let's see how that goes. Okay, that's pretty bright, and that's letting in a lot of light. I'm just going to take the glass, and I'll make sure to shade that smooth. Not sure if it makes a difference, but we can auto smooth that as well. Now this is obviously washed out. That's way too bright. So I'll just end panel that out. And though as that is pretty cool, I'll go to world properties, and I will bring the strength down to like 0.5, which would be half of that, and see how that ends up. Maybe 0.3. 0.3 was my first thought. Okay. Alright, so I was going to mess around with the water, but I kind of like where it is. I'm just going to leave it there. Nope, not too complex. So I got this sci-fi solar panel, and I figured that can be like one of our points. One of our little points of interest, if you will. And you can either grab a hold of the empty that comes with it, or you can just go into this and right click and then select all objects, which will give it to you as well. And you can kind of scale this thing down, and I'm going to turn on snap, turn it to face project, and then tap G. Alright, so this works pretty good if you just grab the empty, and then you can tap G with snap on, and then just kind of place this wherever you want, scale it down, and that can be one of the models that you use for the focal point. So when you've got your little camera angle right here, and you're going to zoom in. Then you can have this sitting there, maybe bring it down just a little bit. And don't try to move your camera with snap on because it's not going to work. There you go. So this would be good. And you can adjust. There's a lot of other things you can do. This tutorial, in the effort of trying to keep this tutorial a little shorter than it would have been, I'm not going to run through and texture everything, but this gives you an idea how to make something very large scale. And if you want to take something like one of your cubes that's your building, and we'll just / so you can see it. What you can do is bring the Blender kit up, grab the materials, and from here I'll just type in psi-phi, and you can just bring any of these in, something like with some lights on it. It'd be pretty cool. And this is going to be off camera a little bit, so it does not have to be perfect. And this actually looks pretty neat. So we'd go back and then go back in here, and you'll see all this is now lit. And so the idea behind scattering is you do not have to texture everything. You can put some randomness to it, put a bunch of low poly buildings in, and then you've got this just massive scene you can work with. You can put boats in here, trees, and what you can do if you're gonna get savvy with it is you can take this, and apparently that's got some weight paint on it. I need to get that off. And what you can do is you can weight paint this with trees or some foliage or old broken docks or anything you want. You can just scatter them. And with one of these other buildings selected, just want to kind of jump into the shading workspace here real quick. And just remember, you can just grab the mapping node in the majority of these, and you can play around with the scale here, or you can rotate like the X on 90 and get a really cool pattern. So then you can scale that until it's got some lights on it, and that way you've got something very unique and very custom. And happy trails to you on that, and I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial lesson. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe and support this channel. Thank you.